Sing this one, Davey. I got my jaw part ready to go.
The sun shone bright and clear that day. We all left Washington to elect the rebel boys in gray at the Battle of Bull Run. They came from Pennsylvania and some from Maryland to see the rebel boys get spanked by Honest Dave's broad hand. We said we'd run them to Atlanta and to...
Hi, welcome to the Sherman House Museum here in Lancaster, Ohio. This is the birthplace of General William Tecumseh Sherman. My name's Laura Bullock and I'm the director here now. So if you'd like to come in, we'll start in this room. The Sherman family came here in 1811. Just a quick overview of General Sherman's life. He was born here in this house in 1820. And then his father passed away when he was at the age of 9. So he went up to the top of the hill here and lived with the Thomas Ewing family. Thomas Ewing was a U.S. Senator, so he was able to get an appointment for him at West Point. And so he graduated at the age of 20. He spent several years stationed in different places in the South. So he learned about the South during that time period. Then eventually he retired or resigned from the military. He married his wife, Ellen Sherman, in 1850, and then he experimented with banking, being a lawyer for a short amount of time, and also being the superintendent of what is now Louisiana State University. He loved that job, but when Louisiana seceded from the Union, he came back back north because he felt that nothing was more important than preserving the union of this country. After the Civil War, he became general of all the U.S. armies, and then when he retired, he and his wife moved to New York City, where he passed away at the age of 71. This room is, to me, it's awesome because first of all, it was built in the 1870s. The Sherman family owned this house until 1868. So this particular room was built on by the second owners here in the museum. The great thing about it, though, is all the furnishings and artifacts you see in this room belong to General Sherman and his wife, Ellen Sherman. The portrait up here in the center is General Sherman just 3 years before he passed away. And this is he was in his complete dress uniform, as you can see. Portrait on the left is of his younger brother, John Sherman. And he was an incredibly influential man during his lifetime. He spent 44 years holding different political offices in Washington, D.C. The two portraits over here on the right wall, the lady is General Sherman's older sister, Mary Elizabeth, and her husband, William Reese, and they built the house next door, which is the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio now. The chairs over here, the black chairs, were a part of the Sherman family legacy, and each one has a different Shakespearean scene carved into the back of it. These are 4 of a original set of 12. The bust here is of General Sherman, and it was done in 1888 by Augustus St. Gaudens, who was the premier sculptor during that time period. The gold furniture here and the oval table belong to the grants to begin with. Then when he moved into the White House as president, this furnishing was passed on to the Shermans. This is kind of special here. This is a hand-painted military shield, and it tells you all about General Sherman's military career from the time he was at West Point until he was a 4-star general. He was this country's 3rd 4-star general after Washington and Grant. This is a picture of General Sherman's home in New York City. And as you can hopefully see here, this is his youngest daughter sitting on the settee that's right here behind me. And the military shield is above her right here in the photo. You can see some of the gold furniture that I was talking about earlier in the photo. And way in the back, we have another piece that belonged to General Sherman upstairs. But what I find fascinating is when you look at this photo, you're looking into the house where Sherman died. And right at this moment, you're standing in the house where he was born. As I said earlier, the room that we just started in was built on by the second owners of this home. But as you walk through this doorway, you're going into the section of the house where the Sherman family did live. And this would have been their parlor. And you're going back 200 years in history. So, you know, I think it's very special that we're able to maintain these kinds of artifacts. One of my favorite pieces in the whole house is this needlework. And this was done by Mary Hoyt Sherman, who was General Sherman's mother, between the ages of 14 and 15. It's called print work. It was supposed to look like an old lithograph. And as most of you probably know, girls didn't have the same education as boys during that period of time, but a well-educated woman showed it through her needlework. Most of the pieces we have in the house are Fairfield County pieces, and the kinds of things that we think that the Sherman family would have had when they lived here. This room is the law office that Charles Sherman, General Sherman's father, maintained here at home. He also had an office downtown. But he was an Ohio Supreme Court judge, and as a Supreme Court judge, he would have ridden a circuit around Ohio. This is the type of map that Charles Sherman probably would have used on his circuits around the state. In 1829, at the age of 40, he died while he was away on one of these circuits. He left his family with 11 children, which was really difficult. And that's when Cump, or General Sherman, Cump went to live with the Ewings. And over here beside this outside door is a print of Thomas Ewing. And that's about what he would have looked like when Cump went to live with them. He also was a very, very influential man during his lifetime. As we head out of this room again, there's another print over here on the doorway, and that's Roger Sherman, who is a Sherman ancestor, and he is the only person in our U.S. history who signed all of our main historical documents, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and so on. The tall bookcase over here came from the original 1820 courthouse for Fairfield County, as did this tall chair over here at the desk. The small desk here did belong to General Sherman, the little writing desk. We're now entering the original part of the Sherman House. This is the section that the Shermans first moved into when they came here in 1811. This is the original main entrance to the house. It was common to have the door on the side of your house so that you kept some of the dirt out of the house. Main Street out here is part of Zane's Trace, the first road into the Northwest Territory into Ohio. Lancaster is situated pretty much on the center of that road, so most people who traveled that road stayed overnight here in Lancaster. And most of the dignitaries would stop and visit the Shermans, either stay here overnight or have dinner with them. And of course, this is the dining room, and it's said that more people sat around Mrs. Sherman's table than in any other inn in Lancaster. So I love to think about the the wonderful conversations that would have gone on around this table. And it was a very important thing because this was the main way that people received news from the outside world. This is another example of Mary Hoyt Sherman's needlework, and it's silk thread on silk fabric. I find it fascinating that, first of all, she was able to do that, with no electricity, 11 children, and so on, but also that it's still here in the house where she lived. From here, we move into the kitchen. And as most houses during that time period, this would have been the busiest room in the house, the busiest, the lightest, and the warmest room in the house. So, the kids would have come in here if they had homework to do, if neighbors wanted to visit or whatever. This would have been the meeting place to begin with. Mrs. Sherman would have had an incredibly busy day. She would have come down probably at daybreak with a baby or two and started her daily chores. She'd have to take a bucket out to the well and then start heating everything over the fire. She had to maintain her fire here in this fireplace all the time, because to let the fire go out in this fire was like letting your house die. Most of the cooking was done out on the hearth here rather than over the fire. And the hot ashes would have been moved out to either around a pan or underneath the pan to do the cooking. But when you stop and think how women dressed during the early 1800s, many of them were burned badly just trying to fix a meal because of this fireplace here. The Shermans were a nice middle-class family, but certainly not a wealthy family. They did not have servants at any time, so they tried to grow or make many of the products that they used here. We have 3 small gardens outside that are all historically accurate. The one right here beside the window is kitchen garden. The kitchen garden here where Mrs. Sherman would have maintained the herbs and such that she used to season her foods. The one out back is a medicinal garden, and here she would have raised the kinds of plants that, to take care of her family, her own medicines, the products that she used to take care of her home and her children. And then across along the wall over there, those are plants that are native to Fairfield County. And they told the early settlers who came in here that this was good farmland, or fair fields, hence the name of the county. The family bathtub is right here. And of course you would have had to heat the water over the fire, then pull your tub over here in front of the fire and take a bath. The proper etiquette for the time was that the father had his bath first, then all the children or all the rest of the family in order of their age. So the water may have been thick by the time the baby got into it. Okay, this is the stairway that the Shermans would have used when they came in here. So you can imagine the dignitaries and the children and everybody else during the early 1800s who just had their hand on this rail like I do. We're upstairs now in the original part of the Sherman House again that was built here in 1810. This is the master bedroom, the bedroom that Charles and Mary Sherman would have occupied, and usually with a baby or two. The cradle here in the middle of the room is the original Sherman cradle that the family brought with them from Connecticut. So all the Sherman babies were placed in that cradle right to begin with. Nursing crib over here I think is a great idea. If you had a child that was still nursing or you know, a sick child, whatever, you could take care of that child right there next to your bed. And you know, if you can imagine what it probably felt like during the winters here with only a fireplace to maintain heat. And this on this far wall here, this is the complete bathroom. The stenciling is interesting. During the early 1800s, every stenciler had his own patterns. These are patterns from Connecticut, so we think that the Sherman family may have enjoyed this. Okay, we're moving into the children's bedroom. As far as we know, this is probably the only children's bedroom that existed when the Sherman family lived here. So there could easily have been 5 children, maybe even 6 children sleeping in this room at any one time. You know, it's amazing that the Sherman family had 11 children and they all grew up to be successful adults, and that was pretty unusual during the time period. And then we can move on to this section. This section was built on by the Shermans in 1816. This would have been a bedroom when they lived here. In 1816, the judge's mother and older sister came to live here with them for a short time. So this was kind of like their bedroom suite, I'd say. And then if you start over here, you'll see the journey of the Sherman family coming in from Connecticut along Zane's Trace, and then this is Tecumseh, the Shawnee Indian chief, and of course that's where Sherman got his middle name. And then as you go around the room, you'll see a little bit of history about Lancaster itself, but mostly about General Sherman. The bust here in the corner is of Thomas Ewing. The portrait here is of Maria Ewing, Thomas Ewing's wife. She originally, in 1829, was General Sherman's foster mother, and then in 1850, when he married their oldest daughter, she became his mother-in-law. This is a portrait of General Sherman that was done in 1859, and that's when he became the superintendent or the president of what is now Louisiana State University. Over here is a portrait of John Sherman. We talked a little bit about him downstairs. His claim to fame mostly is the fact that he wrote the Sherman Antitrust Act. And over here is a bas-relief of Abraham Lincoln, and it also belonged to General Sherman, and then it was passed down through the family and eventually came here. The cases all are artifacts that talk about the Sherman family. And the iPads here tell you everything that you may not ever have known about General Sherman, and the other one talks about John Sherman. The family tree on the opposite wall talks about, first of all, Charles and Mary, who came here originally, and then their family. This is a family Bible that, again, talks about the birth of the Sherman children. This is a recreation of a general's field tent that from the Civil War time period. General Sherman preferred staying in a tent which kept him closer to his men because he was passionate about the lives of his soldiers. The little writing desk here, the foot locker, and the horsehair trunk in the back all went through the war with General Sherman. The flag on the left wall was designed by General Sherman, and that represents the 4 corps that marched to the sea with him. This is a map of General Sherman's route through during the Civil War. It starts with the first Battle of Bull Run, and maybe it does, and then moves on through the entire war. You know, whatever you may be interested in. Okay, we're moving into the Civil War, our Civil War, we call it our war room. And this talks about General Sherman's participation in the war, not the entire Civil War. But as you start and go around the circle here in this room, the photos on the wall or the portraits, paintings, and so on, tell about General Sherman's progress through the Civil War. First one up here is the first Battle of Bull Run, and then you'll go through Shiloh and Vicksburg, and this is the bridge that General Sherman's men built in 4 days, or restored, I'll say, in 4 days. And these are original photographs from General Sherman's office. Up here is the picture of General Sherman and the neckties, and saving the slaves. And then the gun collection, the center cases are artifacts that again tell the story from the beginning of the war around, clear through the Grand Review in Washington, D.C. This is a Confederate flag up here that was captured by Union troops, and as you can see around the edges, pieces were cut out so that the men could have souvenirs to take home with them. These are pictures of General Sherman's generals, the generals that were under him. And this is the portrait up here of, again, General Sherman. This is just pretty much right after the Civil War ended. But it's done by Healy, which is, really a great portrait painter. And this portrait also, or painting, also I like. These are all the generals of the Army of Tennessee. And you can see Grant and Sherman and so on, all the rest. But the interesting thing about this is that it was done in 1880, and it had always been in the Sherman family until a few years ago when they donated it to us. So the first, when we received this, it was the first time that it had ever been seen outside of the Sherman family. And again, just artifacts from, from the time period. A few of the medical instruments and drugs down here. Some of the artifacts belong to General Sherman. Some of them belong to the Ewing family. And as much as possible, we try to get artifacts from Fairfield County. This is another bust of General Sherman that was done during a later period in time. And the last thing you see in the upstairs is an exhibit about the Grand Army of the Republic. This was an organization for veterans who had served for the Union. And after the war, they were incredibly, influential. The next 5 presidents of the United States came from this organization. That's Walt Whitman right there in the soup line. I kind of like this one too, because the only way people knew what was going on during the Civil War was for the writers to take their news articles or the drawings that they did back to the newspaper. So they'd race out and try to get them there as quickly as they could. Just like today, to see who can get the information out first. And then, of course, these are the ex-slaves who had been freed, and thousands of them followed along with Sherman's army. The Ben Butterfield GAR camp was the camp that was here in Lancaster.
Both the North and South realized the role that the railroad could play during the Civil War when it came to moving men and material. And both sides tore up the enemy's tracks whenever they could. Stonewall Jackson's men in Virginia, and especially Sherman's men on his march to the sea. Sherman's men would make a bonfire out of the railroad ties. Then they would lay the rails across the ties. When the rails were red hot, the men would twist them out of shape so the rails could never be used again. People passing by would see these twisted rails, and they would call them Sherman's neckties.
Side horse to Virginia, and battlefield still unknown. Soldiers turned to watch the embers, faces etched like weathered stone. How on earth did it ever come to this? Fighting to the death against our own. Brother against brother, over land our fathers knew. It had to be for more than just the gray and the blue. Steamed on south right into Dixie. Steel rails echo through the night, bringing supplies and the heavy, heavy guns.
soldiers for the coming fight. Are we so different that it had to come this far? Fighting through our cities and our farms, brother against brother over land our fathers knew. It had to be for more than just the gray and the blue. Now I look out on the carnage, shattered men lie all around. As we roll back to Ohio, someday the truth may still be found, still be found. Will we ever stand again under one flag, pulling freight for factories, not war? Brother helping brother on the land our fathers knew. It had to be for more than just the gray. It had to be for more than just the gray